You're listening to Double Time, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Stephen Scott and Sean Priest.
Hey, Sean Priest, how are you?
I'm still on an apple high. Stephen Scott, how are you?
Me too, I think I am. I'm still soaking up the apple juice as we speak.
Oh, please, stop it.
Yes, lots of hardware news, of course. But you know what? I want to dig in today to iOS 18 because I want to know what's in it for me. I want to know what's in it for me.
Well, arguably, the software is the most exciting part, right? I'm sure lots of people have been playing with the betas, maybe not. But the software is where the most noticeable changes happen, I think.
Yeah, well, not everyone's going to buy a new iPhone, right? So, I mean, it's fair to say that, we're probably more interested in the software side of things, but in particular, the accessibility side of it. So today, coming up, we're going to be hearing from Shelly Brisbin. She's joining us in a moment. Of course, author, broadcaster, and podcaster. Most recently, of course, on the Parallel podcast. Sadly, no more. But yeah, she is joining us today. She's going to be getting all excited ahead of her iOS Access for All book release for iOS 18. We're going to talk to her a little bit about that as well. Also joining us a bit later, Patrick O'Rourke from Pocket Lint, and he's going to talk to us about some of the more mainstream features that he's excited about in iOS 18. I'm going to be honest, the list of accessibility features is much longer, I think, and much more interesting.
Well, of course, obviously to us, but I mean, there's things outside of the blindness bubble, believe it or not, which I think I'm finding quite intriguing myself. I think there's some really cool and sort of innovative features implemented.
Innovative.
Innovative. I don't know, but initiative. I don't know. The point is, I think there's some really cool features that I haven't seen anywhere else. I mean, Well, we're going to get into it. I don't want to spoil it too soon.
And actually, I've been putting up on Mastodon as well, asking you guys what you think about what your sort of top iOS 18 feature is that you're looking forward to. Lots of your comments to get into as well. And we're going to have a demonstration of, I think, one of the most exciting features for blind users of iPhones. Coming up, Sean Randall is here with a review of Braille Screen Input.
Yes.
So if you've not heard about this yet, you've not heard about the updates coming, if you've not been diving into the betas, if you've been holding off and you're looking forward to downloading and getting started in iOS 18, this is one feature. If you're a Braille user, you're going to love this feature. So Sean's here to demonstrate that a little bit later. But let's dive right in and welcome our first guest to the show today to talk all about iOS 18. That is, of course, the author of iOS Access for All book, the new one coming soon. Shelly Brisbane's back with us here on Double Tap. Hey, Shelly, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Listen, great to have you back on with us, of course, talking iOS 18 today. And all of the new accessibility features is really what I want to focus in on here, because there are so many cool features coming in this year. And, not just on the visual impairment side or the blindness side of things, because, of course, yes, we will talk about VoiceOver and some cool things coming, even to the Magnifier app, which is getting a little bit bloated, if I'm honest.
You just stole my line then.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. But honestly, I'm with you on this, right? I just feel it's getting a little bit full of stuff. And actually, there are things in that Magnifier app, I think, are those really features you would consider low vision? But anyway, we'll come back to that. But, the bigger picture, I guess, more broadly around disability is all of the features that are coming really do apply to many different types of disabilities. And the headline one, which I think a lot of people have been excited about, is eye tracking. This is going to make a big difference to the usage of iPhones and Macs by people with physical disabilities, right?
Yeah, and I know that for a long time, people had more flexibility with one platform than the other, because whether it was direct eye tracking or whether it was some sort of head-worn device that you could use to control a device, that wasn't available on all the platforms. And now that proper eye tracking is available just intrinsically to both Mac and iOS, I think that's going to open it up for a lot of people. And it should be remembered that eye tracking is the thing that kind of makes Vision Pro run for people who don't have visual disabilities. And so now they've added what eye tracking is really all about, which is access for people who can't use their hands to gesture or operate a mouse or whatever it is. And so I think it's great, and I do feel like it's going to bring a lot of people to these platforms that haven't been there before or have only been able to use them partially.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a game changer, I think, because, as you mentioned, there's no additional hardware here. This is using the front-facing camera to set this up and use eye tracking. I think this could really bring it to so many more people that it could make a huge difference. It's one of those, as Steven said, we're usually inside our bubble. What's new with VoiceOver? But actually, when it comes to that feature, I thought this could change the industry when it comes to accessibility.
Well, and like I say, to me, the ability to use all the platforms or multiple platforms, if you want to, is important because there's so much with iCloud and all of the other features that Apple sort of promotes, whether they're just as services or whether they're apps that run on all the platforms. I think they want us to feel free to use Macs and iPhones. Not everybody does that, but a lot of people do. And a lot of people can't necessarily use one platform because it doesn't have the exact same features as the other platform. I know I talk to people with disabilities who have been using a Mac for years, people with physical disabilities who are in chairs, and they use a Mac for years, but they haven't been able to use the phone because those features weren't available in the same way.
This is where a huge company like this can almost become an assistive technology company, even though they are a mainstream organization, in Apple's sense at least.
Yeah, I'm imagining the assistive tech companies going, "Oh, come on, Apple, do you have to take everything?"
Yeah.
and I should say
every
that
single scrap.
A Vision Pro, I still think of that as an accessory. It's a $3,500 accessory that most people don't have. So for our purposes as Mac and iPhone users and/or iPhone users, it's obviously much more available. But the fact that they did the Vision Pro clearly gave them enough information about how to do it that they could bring it to the other devices.
And you've got iOS access for all the book coming out, of course, focusing on iOS 18 soon. Do you ever look into the Apple Vision Pro? I mean, have you kind of skipped that?
I've done a demo. I have not done. Actually, a few people have in back channels tried to convince me to write the book about Vision Pro, and I've said, well, first of all, more than 4 people need to buy it, and also you need to deliver one to my house tomorrow. So, I mean, it's interesting, and I think the most fascinating thing about the Vision Pro, which again is probably a learning experience for those of us who are watching how accessibility is growing on the other platforms. The fascinating thing about the Vision Pro is how many different input methods there are. Because obviously VoiceOver is on the Vision Pro and Zoom and all the things that we're used to. But there's so many different methods of tracking, from eye-based tracking to recognizing finger gestures or wrist gestures. And those are the things I got to do. I got to do some of those alternative input gestures because the eye tracking didn't work for me because I have some vision, but I can't find stuff on that screen. And I will not say that I was a completely successful Vision Pro user in the 45-minute demo that I had, but I will say that I got to see a number of input options, and I can see a way that somebody with low vision or who is blind could hack a Vision Pro in a way that would be useful to them. And I know a few people in the blind community have them, a few, maybe like 2 that I know of. And then there are a few people, there's a guy who did a great YouTube video who has no arms, who's made great use of Vision Pro. And obviously he's all in on eye tracking, whereas I'm like, I can't do that, buddy.
Yes.
So it has been interesting to see how the Vision Pro has sort of expanded our understanding of many different ways that input can happen.
Oh, it's the definition of a Gen 0 device, right? I mean, not many people are going to buy into the Vision Pro, but it's good to see how Apple are working on how people are going to interact with these devices. You're absolutely right. I'm interested in just sticking with the eye tracking for a little bit longer. Do you think there's going to be a limitation on what hardware can actually run this? As in, does it rely on AI? Is it relying on Apple Intelligence of some description? Is there some sort of cutoff point for the iPhone or iPad maybe that it can use?
I don't know, obviously, but I would guess that it's not AI constrained, but it's chip constrained. So I'm sure you have to have Apple Silicon on the Mac. And for the iPhone, I don't know what the cutoff would be. It might be Pro phones. I can't remember where we are with the A series processors right now, but I can see Apple saying that's the cutoff, because obviously it takes some horsepower to not only do the eye tracking, but do all the other things that the phone is trying to do. So that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Talk to me a little bit about this music haptics feature that is coming into iOS 18. This is for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, right? How does it work? What does it do?
Well, you basically play music, and the rhythm of the music is generated as a haptic for you. And so you can experience the feel of the music, just as a deaf person at a live concert could be in the right place and feel the drums or feel the vibration of the speaker. And so that's what music haptics does for you. And I actually immediately went to sort of an underreported feature from a couple of iOS versions ago, where we now have live lyrics, basically karaoke on your iPhone. And I can imagine somebody with a hearing disability being able to use the music haptics and sing along to karaoke, either read the words or actually do it as karaoke. It just seems like such a great fun thing, and sort of a really, I'm sort of surprised because it feels like as mature as the music app is, and frankly, as it's not productivity based. It's just for fun, but they added it. I think that's great.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is something that I have said on the show so many times. This has sometimes accessibility, and I've always tried to work out what the word is to try and associate the sort of technology with. I guess the word is medical. It always feels medical. It always feels like it has some kind of... Like, I've talked to companies before and said, hey, I'd love to talk about your product. Blind people would love to use it. And they go, we don't talk about medical conditions, and we're not for medical. And I'm like, no, I just want to listen to some music, In my case, I remember, actually, I'll tell you, it was Bose frames. I wanted to talk about Bose frames. And the response I got back from the company was, we don't talk about medical conditions. And I had a back and forward with them to explain... No, I just want to listen to music. I'm not suggesting these are going to cure my vision.
See, that feels like some sort of legal hedge. Like, we are not a medical device company. We don't want anybody to think we are. We don't want some government to think that we are and get us in trouble. And so...
Unless there's money in it.
Right. Well, there's just that.
I mean, let's be honest.
We're not cynical around here, are we?
No, and look, if they did want to go down that road, I'd be all for it. I'd support them with it, because I'd say, well, look, hey, why not, right? I mean, if they became, if Bose were to create glasses that, you could put, what do you call them? Prescriptions. That's what I was going for. Yeah, sure. Then that'd be fine. Then absolutely, that would make total sense. I'd be all for that. Well, but yeah, you're right. It's about having fun. It really is.
Well, the point is that they've made an accessibility feature where really there wasn't a shout for it, a gap maybe. I mean, I'm not using the right words here at all. But
there wasn't a demand. There wasn't a groundswell of support. There weren't people in the deaf community going, what we got to have? Is haptics and Apple Music.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know. I have no idea whether Spotify that's software, so it probably has to be supported in hardware. I don't know whether there's any circumstance under which another streaming service gives you access to something like that if your hardware supports it. But this feels like, I guess the most cynical thing I could say about it is maybe it'll get some deaf people to see that Apple Music might be something worth subscribing to. But even if that's not the case, they can put music on their own iPhone and consume it that way.
Or realize that Taylor Swift's music's, it's okay.
I really like the words they use to describe this, though, because when I first heard about haptic music, I just thought it was going to be like a metronome, just picking up the drum beat. But they talk about textures and enhanced vibrations. So it sounds like it's giving it more than just, as I said, like a metronome.
Well, and it also feels like if they're talking about, I sort of call that 3D, right? You have multi-layers. Yeah. That feels like that could apply to something else. I don't know what, but perhaps it could be a navigation aid or something. You have haptics that have layers that give a blind person more information than they have from just a simple haptic that says hot, hot, cold, 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 cold. Maybe go this degree left. Oh, there's a mountain there. Maybe you don't want to go. I'm not even thinking of good examples, but you know what I mean. No. If you have layered haptics, you could construct the amount of information in your environment to suit you.
But you're kind of picking up on something here, which I think is common now across the industry, and this is where I think mainstream tech companies. We can say that they do sometimes become assistive tech companies by the back door, because what they're doing is they're developing something like this, and as we say, it's for fun, but actually look at the applications that could be brought into, so you could have that sort of textured haptic feedback. And this, of course, could be great for someone who's blind and deaf, or blind with, say, for example, Usher syndrome, someone who has both hearing and visual impairments. So, when you think of it in that sense, it could be really cool. This could be really, really useful. I want to talk a little bit about some of the physical side of things as well. For physical disabilities, there are a lot of people who cannot use their computer in you might call the traditional way, using a keyboard, a mouse, using a phone with touchscreen. And for people like that, there are many, many difficulties and challenges they face. I mean, voice control, of course, is one area which is very popular among certain people. And one feature that's coming in with iOS 18 in particular is the ability to listen out for and understand atypical speech, which is, of course, going to help a lot of people with a lot of different conditions. This is good news. But I want to play in this clip from Colin Hughes. We interviewed him last week. We talked to him ahead of the event, the Apple event, of course, this week. Talking to him about his experience of voice control and one particular feature that he was looking for. He'd campaigned on it over the last year. Apple said they would put it in, and then he had trouble finding it and getting it working. And it was only because of a YouTuber it actually came to fruition. It appears, anyway. Let's listen to this comment, and we'll react on the other side.
But one of the things I campaigned for last year was the capitalization of proper nouns in voice control. And in May, Apple announced that they were coming. During the beta, initial first couple of betas, that wasn't working. So I spoke to a prominent YouTuber with a lot of followers, flagged it up to him, and he mentioned it in a video, but I followed it up in the feedback app. A week later, another beta was released and the problem was fixed. So feeding back, airing publicity on missing features, things not working properly, does lead to positive change.
Now, obviously, and we must say this, this was a beta phase. So, we will see the addition and removal of features over time. So, it would have been the case that if Apple had announced, and they did announce this feature, then it would have come in at some point. Colin was very keen, and I can understand why, to almost, just remind Apple of that commitment and say, hey, you might want to put this in here. Because I get that. I totally understand that. It does feel sometimes that if something doesn't catch on social media or people aren't talking about it, there's a danger that it will just disappear off. So I think Colin did the right thing here. But Shelly, it does call to the reality that, these things may be announced. There's no guarantee they'll ever actually be implemented.
Well, right. And I think the beta period is almost always the best time, whether it's something Apple has announced or whether it's something that you really want that you see as a bug. If you're able to communicate that during a beta phase, obviously it helps if you have a big social media following, but even if you don't, during that beta phase, if you can say, and I've done feedback over the years, and I've fed back about things that aren't even new to a beta, but that are long-standing things. And I'm like, hey, while you're in there working on it and doing a beta, any chance you could do this? And varying degrees of success. But I think it does sort of speak, and I guess I'm going to take it positively in the sense that it does speak to the way people sometimes feel like if they write to accessibility@apple.com, maybe it's a black hole, and whether that's true or not, that's how people feel. And stories like this, where you feel like you've made a direct impact, whether it's holding Apple accountable for something they've promised, or whether it's just making sure that you can find a feature that you couldn't necessarily find, it's a good time to do it when they're out making betas.
Yeah, absolutely. Feedback, as we always say, is so important. It does seem like a black hole sometimes, but who knows? Maybe someone's listening. Shelly, you've been playing with the beta previous to the official release, obviously. Is there an accessibility feature that stands out above all else for you in, let's say, iOS 18? Let's stick with that. Well,
I'm going to be entirely selfish, and I'm also going to go against mainstream common wisdom to do this. So I have low vision. I like the dark icons. A lot of people, this is not an accessibility feature. A lot of people don't, and frankly, not all the dark icons are the same, are as good. Like the YouTube icon is too dark. I can't see that arrow anymore. But most of the dark icons I love. It probably means that I can do more and change my wallpaper so that it's a little more colorful because I can see the icons better. So again, that's not an accessibility feature. And I know there's some folks in the mainstream community who are like, yeah, dark icons are great, but could we please change them? And that's, I'm sure, going to be possible. But for me, the dark icons are super cool.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's fantastic. And, it's the ability to customize in the way that Android users have been doing for years. And, I hear the Android people going, are you kidding me? We've been doing this forever. And you're now getting excited about changing an icon?
I know, it is kind of silly, isn't it?
it feels that way. But I mean, Apple get there in the end eventually. But like you say, this is not an accessibility feature. And it kind of goes to the point that, this is the kind of point we want to make to the mainstream, isn't it? To say not all features are necessarily accessibility features. I mean, dark mode for a lot of people is not an accessibility thing. It's, think of in the mainstream how they talk about it. It's for people who code or work in the night, and don't want to be having their face blinded with light. They just want to work in a dark room, as coders and people like that do, because they're very secretive with their codes and their slashes and their backslashes and whatever else. And that's all fine and good. But, for us, a huge difference. I mean, I want this to expand across the system. I want my system to almost hate light. I want a button that says, I hate light. And I press it, and then no white light will ever appear on my screen again. I hate
light. Wow. That t-shirt coming soon.
I'm going to name my shortcut. I hate light, and then everything's going to go into dark mode. Now, I will say, I didn't use dark mode on the Mac for a long time because it was so hit and miss. And unless I wasn't, there was a whole series of things. I wasn't using Safari as my browser, so Chrome or Firefox wasn't as friendly to dark mode. But then I started using Safari, and then I was like, you know what? I haven't tried dark mode on the Mac in a number of years. And so I did it, and it's really awesome. And it's not the Sequoia beta. I'm not on that right now. But I in the past few months, I've been much more able to use dark mode, which I prefer to invert colors, because in invert colors on the Mac, when I have to switch back and forth, I get that little screen in the center that says, we're switching to invert colors now. I didn't really need that, thank you. But, dark mode is... I love that people other than in this accessibility community have embraced it. I love that it's a choice for them. But I also love that it exists and that we still have to invert color modes on a very, very rare occasion. I have to go to non-smart invert colors, which is if I feel like I'm going back to like iOS 7 or something like that. Let's go to some dumb invert colors. Every once in a while, there's a screen that you can, that's the title right there. That's the screen that you can only read with that. But dark mode is so much better because so many more third parties and Apple itself have been supporting it better, not only on iOS, but on the Mac. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that per app settings make it possible for you to put your app into invert colors mode if it is not supportive of dark mode. And I use that all the time. I have plenty of apps.
That's a great tip.
I have plenty of apps that just do not like dark mode. And I go and I per app setting, like the Roomba app that runs my robot, my vacuum robot, that does not support dark mode. And so I just go use per app settings. Again, this is not new to iOS 18, although I think iOS 18 might have added a few more per app setting options. It just seems to work a little better. So I'm having fun with per app settings.
Wow. That's an excellent tip.
I did not even think about that as an option. I must admit, I don't go in there very often. I kind of just think, what do I do with this? And then, ignore it, which is pretty much my life. So I open a cupboard and think, I'm dealing with that today.
The contrast and the bold text and all the they call per app settings. Most of those settings really are for low vision type things, but you can customize so much for a specific app, and you don't have to go, I need to triple click to switch into or out of invert colors, or I have to go to create a short or go to Control Center to do dark mode. Occasionally I have to do that, but mostly I don't.
And this is the thing about low vision. I mean, it's such a spectrum in itself. I consider myself in the category of blind, but I do have some vision, so I kind of fall into the low vision category as well. So, and for me, the challenge is often the bright lights, and that's in case people do wonder. That's why I wear sunglasses all the time. I'm not trying to be cool. Trust me, that is not a thing I am trying to do.
But you
although these glasses are pretty cool. The glasses are cool. I'm not. I want to talk about VoiceOver and Magnifier because these are two areas for us that I think are obviously very interesting. For Magnifier, kind of crosses, as I said earlier, it kind of crosses into both areas now because you've got this text detection feature, which is pretty cool, the live text options, all that. And you've got sort of, I would say, those traditional kind of magnifier features, but it is getting a bit bloated. Let's maybe unpack that for people.
It's really hard to find what you're looking for in Magnifier. I was trying to refresh myself because in iOS 18, what in May was called reader mode, and I guess now is capture mode. There are all these different modes. One thing Magnifier does for you is it has many options, color filters and zoom and detection features and all these things. And you can put as many or as few of them on the control card as you want to. And that's the saving grace, because there's too many of them. And as a low vision person, I don't remember what those icons mean, and they're not named. So it's like, wait, I should probably memorize my favorite 4 or something like that. And that Magnifier is, they're just trying to put too much in it. And I don't know, as a low vision person, it's natural for me to go on Magnifier. It's on my home screen. But I wonder, as a blind person who wants to use a detection feature, whether it's kind of weird. Like, you have to start out in Magnifier and then you have to dig down and get the detection features.
Yes.
It just feels like it's kind of a weird match.
I totally agree. It's almost like it's turning into Apple's Seeing AI. I mean,
kind of, yeah.
They're putting so many different things in there, and it just seems, if nothing else, it just seems misnamed. Magnifier, because I used it quite a lot when I had, when it was usable to me. I thought the Magnifier was actually pretty good. But as you said, things seem to be hidden away in there.
You wouldn't go in there, would you? I don't feel I'd want to. It just wouldn't be my first port of call.
Well, yeah, you just wouldn't expect to find the light detection mode, for example. You wouldn't expect to find it there. But it feels like they need to separate it out a little bit now.
Yeah, if new people are to discover those detection features, it needs to be somewhere where they can. And I'm not sure what that is. I sort of like the idea of it being in an app. I just don't think either you rename it and you redo the interface, or you have a separate app that's called Detectors or something like that, and you put all those things that qualify as and I keep saying, I suspect more detectors will continue to come. We got point and speak last year, and now we have this reader mode thing, and some of those require a LiDAR-equipped iPhone, which is still probably going to be the Pro phones. But if you're going to let people know those exist, you're going to have to surface them a little better than hiding them under a tab in Magnifier.
Can I dig into this a bit? So the Magnifier app is to what most people would be like the traditional handheld magnifier, but in electronic form.
Right.
As you see, with all the filters and ability to zoom in and change the contrast and all of that. When you talk about the reader mode, is that like when you get those handheld magnifiers that can also talk as well, where it can sort of read what it sees?
No, that's what's confusing. What reader is? I called it when I was writing about the accessibility preview back in May for 6 colors, and I didn't know much about it. But basically, the way they described it is that you capture text and then you turn it into something that's readable to you with fonts and sizes that are comfortable for you. So I capture a menu, and then it's got all the cursive writing or whatever it is, and then it gets converted into a text window on top of Magnifier. And the images that I saw in May were like really huge text. So it was like, I guess it's intended for relatively small amounts of text. And I have an iPhone 13 in my hand, and I haven't been able to find it. There's something in there called capture mode, and I have a suspicion that Reader is either requiring a newer chip, or I don't think it requires the AI, or maybe LiDAR, because the detection features definitely require. And it doesn't really make sense that it would require LiDAR, because text detection, live text, all that stuff is available in lower end phones. But I confess to being a little flummoxed by how much there is in Magnifier. And it's funny because you start just a little behind the scenes when you're writing a book and you have a section. You go, okay, I'm going to write about Magnifier. Magnifier does these 3 or 4 things. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 pages on it. I'm going to tell you how to open Magnifier, and I'm going to tell you where the settings are. And then all of a sudden it does 50 things. And you're like, oh, how do I organize this now? And you're trying to fit your existing organization into this new, and you have to like tear the section down and start over, basically.
Okay, Shelly, stay with us because I want to come back and talk more with you about all of these cool accessibility features in iOS 18. But I want to broaden the scope a little bit as well for those who are interested in some of the other more mainstream features. Let me bring in Patrick O'Rourke. He is from Pocket Lint. Patrick, welcome to Double Tap.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Apple Intelligence, I'm guessing, is the one feature that you're going to be talking about a lot. But I've got to ask you the question about where we are with Apple Intelligence, because it feels to me like it's, this cake is not baked. That's the feeling I'm getting. It feels like we're going to have to wait a bit of time before we see a fully fledged Apple Intelligence. Am I right?
I think it's going to be a long a long road. Like even in the developer beta that just dropped, not all of the features that were promised when Apple Intelligence was revealed are there. It's going to be a while. There's some stuff like you have the more conversational Siri, which I like, seems to work quite well. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that are just, they're not quite there yet.
Do you feel slightly, I don't know if it's frustration or impatience. I feel slightly, I don't want to use the word conned, but, it's like...
You just did.
I know, I'm so sorry. But it's almost like, well, is this ready to go or not? How long do you think the rollout is going to take until we see this fully integrated into the core of iOS?
I think we'll see it throughout the next year. And that, like, I don't want to use the word conned, but I would say that it's disappointing to some extent, just because, like, I just got off doing several Pixel 9 related reviews, the 9 Pro, the 9 Pro Fold, and whatnot. And say what you want about the AI features that are available on the Google side of things, but they're there, and for the most part, they work. But when you turn to the Apple side, it's very much still a work in progress. Like, one of the things that I like to point out is they're not even bringing Apple Intelligence to the public beta. It's strictly in the developer beta right now. Mm-hmm. And you would think you would want the most hardcore people that are using the public beta that aren't developers to test those features out. But Apple doesn't quite feel that they're even ready for that audience yet.
But we know what Apple are like, don't we? I mean, we've seen this playbook before, and the fanboys and the fangirls like me, are the people who support that, who give them a free pass when it comes to features not coming out in line with other features from other providers. So they are a little bit slower with Apple Intelligence. That is the playbook with Apple more generally. Do you think their fans will give them a pass on this?
So I always describe Apple as like it's a company that does things later than pretty much everybody out there for the most part. There was a time when they were first. That was long ago. Now they're often late, but in some cases they're better. Not all the time anymore, but in a lot of cases they still are. I think for me, if Apple Intelligence comes out and it works for me and I can find a way to integrate it into my life and how I use my phone, then I'll be a little bit more forgiving. Because again, like I just said, a lot of glowing things about the Pixel 9, but beyond the like some of the photography features related to like super zoom and things like that, I don't use Gemini. Like I don't use Gemini Live at all. I haven't found a reason to need to use it. It's not integrated into my life. I think for me, if Apple can find a way to convince me to use Apple Intelligence consistently, if it's one of the features we haven't quite seen yet, then I'll be a little bit more forgiving. But I have a feeling that's probably not gonna happen.
Isn't the only thing we really want is a Siri that works well, basically that conversational start as we did see during the betas.
And you do have a little bit of that now in the current iteration of Apple Intelligence. I think one of the coolest things is that Siri is contextually aware. Like you can, if you have something like you ask what time a hockey game is or something like that, and it shows up, you can then add that to your calendar, that sort of thing. That's one specific example. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work in terms of being contextually aware, which is disappointing. And I'd like to see that come to fruition over the next couple of months. But for sure, Siri, at least for me, is one of the standouts. The fact that it's more conversational and a little bit more useful than the voice-activated assistant was before.
So beyond Apple Intelligence, Patrick, what else are you looking forward to in iOS 18?
Yeah, I would say it's just all the little changes. There's nothing that really stands out. Like initially when the first public beta dropped, it was the ability to tint icons. I played around with that for a couple hours and then kind of moved on with my life and decided it wasn't for me. I do like the I'll preface it with like one thing that has stood out to me. If Apple's able to pull it off, I like the light and dark mode icons. That's really cool. I've been wanting Google to do something similar. It still hasn't happened yet to my knowledge. I'm just hoping third-party developers kind of pick that up relatively quickly and make dark versions of their icons. Because in the public beta that I'm running on my phone, it's not great. Some of the designs aren't perfect, so. I do like that feature, and I hope it pans out because I'm a big move between light mode and dark mode user.
Now, I've been reading a lot about the Photos app. Tell us about the upgrade that it's had in iOS 18.
The layout is totally different. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me. I don't think I necessarily like the new layout, to be quite honest. I every time I open it, I'm a bit confused, and it's one of the changes with iOS 18 that makes me wish I wasn't running the public beta on my main device. And then there's some stuff happening in terms of Apple Intelligence. Like there's a very similar feature to what the Pixel offers, where you can remove objects from photos. That's coming down the line. It's available in a developer beta right now, I believe. I'm not 100% sure when it'll make its way publicly, but I don't think it's going to come in the first like retail release of the latest iOS.
One of the things that really stood out to me and got my interest was the Passwords app. Have you played with that at all?
Yeah, I did. I think it's good that it's around. It exists. I'm kind of entrenched in 1Password. I've used it for like well over a decade now at this point. And Passwords doesn't necessarily offer anything for me personally as a user to want to switch. Especially because in my new role, I like switch between Android devices and iOS and Mac and Windows, and I kind of need that multi-platform solution. That said, when I've played around with it, it works quite well. It's a good app. I think it's something that probably should have been around years ago. So it's great to see Apple release like a baked-in official option for saving passwords. And the layout's good. It works better than 1Password. I will give it that too.
Are you happy giving over your data to a company like 1Password or any, I guess, company like that essentially stores your passwords? I mean, they're all the same to some degree, but I don't know. I feel personally with Apple and Google, there's a bit more security there. I mean, certainly with Apple, encrypted on-device data. I feel that, passwords and everything, they're safe, they're secure. Maybe I'm naive on this, but do you give that any thought?
A little bit. I mean, to be quite honest with you, the thought hasn't occurred to me just because 1Password's been around for so long, and to my knowledge, they haven't had any significant breaches. But now that you mention it, it's probably a good thing to consider to some extent.
Breaking news.
Like if I'm gonna trust a company with my data, it would probably be Apple. Some of the things that they have in place are a little bit above what Google's doing. But yeah, I just like I have hundreds of passwords in 1Password, and it's the Passwords app hasn't convinced me to make that switch simply because I'm a multi-platform person. If I was like entrenched specifically just in iOS and Mac, I would probably put in the effort and make that change. Yeah, that's a good point. I've never, wouldn't say never, but the thought hasn't crossed my mind in quite some time, but it's something important to consider.
Patrick, thank you so much for coming on to Double Tap.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Patrick.
Now, let's go back to Shelly, because, of course, Shelly, we have to talk about the big accessibility feature that Sean and I are most interested in, and that is VoiceOver. What's new there?
Not a lot. There's some new voices. And to be honest, there's so many voices now that I can't remember which ones are new. I have become a fan, and perhaps your brilliant listeners will be able to write in and to say, well, actually, to me, because I just love it when people do that. But I discovered over the summer a voice called Evan Enhance that I'm really fond of, and I feel like it's new because I didn't find him before. He's an American English voice, and if he's new in iOS 18, that is so far my VoiceOver find.
You haven't tried Fred then, no?
I know Fred well.
Everybody knows Fred.
Everybody knows Fred. I remember in the days of the PowerBook that I had back in the day, and Fred was my voice back then. And there was no voiceover back then either. I mean, Fred was just a TTS voice, a text-to-speech that you could use. And basically, my wife and I, not married at the time, but we were together at school, and we would sit next to each other, and I'd make it say rude words. That was pretty much fun. No, absolutely nothing has changed. I mean, it's
she
like
married
40
you anyway,
years have passed.
so.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's it. Well, that says a lot.
You just switched to eloquence instead, which, to be fair, there's not much difference.
Well, Fred, as I've said before, Fred is Apple's eloquence. That is absolutely the truth.
Can I have a quick Fred story?
Oh.
So Fred's been on the Mac forever, right? But if you're not a VoiceOver user, you probably don't know he's available on iOS. He's not available in the voices that are outside, the Siri voices that are outside accessibility speech. And I actually had the opportunity one time, it was Jason Snell on some podcast he was doing, talking about, I'd really like to get Fred. I want to make this audio thing, and I'd really like to use Fred, but I need him on iOS. And I raised my little hand, and I wrote on Twitter, probably Twitter at the time, like, I know how to do it. I can tell you. Just open up VoiceOver, and there's Fred. And he's like, that's really complicated. And I wrote it up for him. So
Don't you love it, though, when people who are not users of VoiceOver, when they turn it on for the first time
and they lose their minds,
they kind of go, "Oh wow, that's incredible! How you can use your phone." And I
now can we turn it off, please?
Yeah, please turn this off immediately because I am now lost.
Right.
That's like
Magnifier or Zoom, I should say.
Turning on audio description on someone's TV and then just
leaving. Why does the TV keep telling me what was going to happen next in the film?
Right.
Yeah, I know. It's so good. I mean, obviously, Braille Screen Input is one we've talked about, and that is a great feature of VoiceOver. Are you getting much of a chance to play with that? Are you a Braille user to test
be
that?
honest, I have not. I will be documenting it for purposes of the book. I don't use it in my own life a great deal. I am a Braille reader. I think I'm much more, and I have a Braille display that I use for testing and stuff, and I think that's sort of much more my style. I know a lot of people who are big Braille Screen Input fans, and I know it's an important feature, and they've made a lot of updates, but I haven't really used it a great deal myself.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing I suppose we should mention, and it is in some ways a small thing, but also a huge thing, especially for people new to VoiceOver, and that's the tutorial that they're bringing in, which is big news because they've had a very small gesture-based kind of like introduction in the when you go into the settings, you go into accessibility and VoiceOver. When you go in there is a little bit of okay, so here's how you swipe, you navigate by swiping, you double tap, and that kind of was as far as it went. This goes into a bit more detail. Now, is this clearly, I feel this is coming from the community.
Probably so. And also, remember that on macOS, there's been a more substantial tutorial for a long time. So when
Which
you
is
enable,
still terrible.
Well, that's true, but at least it exists, right?
I'm sorry, it's boring. It's 15 minutes long, and it was the longest hour I ever spent. It's so
what do you
boring.
want a tutorial to be? A roller coaster ride of emotions?
Yes, I want fun. I want suspense,
thrills and chills and suspense.
If you don't get this gesture right, it will delete the internet. That's the kind of suspense I want.
What I would be happy with is, okay, here's the tutorial. Here's the button where you can print or make a cheat sheet for yourself of all the things in the tutorial. Because I will take the tutorial and I'll go, okay, I get it. And then I won't use VoiceOver on the Mac for a while. And I'll be like, oh, what was the gesture to do this thing? Don't make me go back to the tutorial, please. And so I would like that. But I do think that the iOS thing, to the extent that the existence of a tutorial is good, we won't argue about the quality of the tutorial unless you really want to. But I think it's good that iOS has sort of expanded it. I mean, the thing that you've always been able to do in the tutorial that I think is sort of underrated is you could say, you could go into the test area of the practice area, and you could say 3-finger double tap or double tap and hold, and it would tell you what it would do. So if you, even as a VoiceOver user, just like our sighted friends accidentally get themselves in VoiceOver and Zoom, but even as a VoiceOver user, if you do some gesture and you're really not sure what you did or how to get out of it, you can repeat that experience in the practice area. And again, that's not new at all, but I kind of love it because it reminds me how do I do screen curtain again? And I'd rather not look at my book because, that's just takes forever.
Way to sell the book there, Shelly.
I know, right?
Just go into the settings.
Buy my book while you're holding your phone and doing VoiceOver practice.
No, look, it's definitely handy to have there as a reminder, but there's no context to it.
Correct.
Why would you use that gesture in what context? Which is where the tutorials come in.
Well, no, you need more than that, but I think it's a nice reinforcement.
Yeah.
I'm just going through my list here of all the different features that are coming in, and there's one that stood out, which has been around for a long time. It's been on the Mac for a while. I didn't know it was on iOS 18, so just maybe clarify this for me. Hover typing.
Hover text, yeah.
Or hover text, I should say, yes. Which
what's interesting about that? So the idea is, if you are typing or if you're tapping on something, and you can see text below your finger. Like if you're on the Mac, this is an easy example because hover text has been around on the Mac. If I point my cursor at something, then I get a little label below it that tells me what that thing is, especially if it's an icon that doesn't have a label. And I don't really know how useful this will be on iOS. Now, iOS for a long time has had the ability, if you press and hold on something and you get the loop and you can see a magnified version of what you're typing, which is kind of different. But so I'm not sure whether hover text is something I personally would do a lot. I think a new iPhone user, though, might, because there are a lot of icons that are unnamed. Because we're taking up less room, right? We don't want to have names for things. We just want to have pictures of stuff. And so I think hover text could potentially help somebody who doesn't remember what that little star icon does, or is trying to edit text with their eyeballs and maybe not as zoomed in as they want to be because the phone is so small. So I think it's useful for some folks. Not me personally, though.
I want to ask you about Apple Intelligence because, of course, everyone's excited about it, and we'll get more detail about the rollout over the next year or so, I guess. I mean, more will come than what we already know so far. But I wonder how much of that will help accessibility. And I'm thinking about, in particular, image descriptions, because Google have gone ahead with this with TalkBack 15. Now you have, this ability to get, image descriptions right there to your phone via Google Gemini. So without really having to go off and do something, the image description is generated right there for you. Apple could do this with Apple Intelligence quite easily, it would seem. But they haven't done that yet, and they haven't really promised that yet, have they?
No, and I think it's because we're going to have to see a fuller rollout. And, there is all this, since we have existing image description that is based on machine learning, I think probably what has to happen is there has to be there's either going to be an either or situation where you're going to say, okay, I want the hardware on my device to do this, or I want to kick off Apple Intelligence and have it do it. And because Apple Intelligence is so incomplete, it feels like if you added that to accessibility right now, it might be sort of confusing. What is the sort of way those things work together? And I think we'll see it eventually. We have to. Actually, the way I talk about AI with people a lot of times is there are things that we can do with accessibility apps and with hardware that use what is essentially AI, like image description, like what Seeing AI does or what Be My AI does. And those are, intelligence-based things. And so what we're getting now is software that has even more intelligence and can take what the hardware gives you as far as an image and do more interpretation of it. And so I would be I don't think I'd like it if we just all of a sudden threw a lot of Apple Intelligence into VoiceOver before it was ready in the rest of the Apple universe.
I know, we're just not very good at being patient.
I know,
I don't care if it's ready, I want to use it now.
I want my AI right now.
Yeah.
Plus, it doesn't make it that easy for you as, writing a book about
I
about
just made a space for another chapter.
It's just one.
Well, that was the struggle I was having, because I was originally going to do like a delta of the old book and the new book. I was just going to do a little update because I didn't think there was a lot happening. And then all of a sudden there's this AI thing. It's like, where am I going to put Apple Intelligence? And I just decided, all right, fine, we'll give it its own chapter and maybe we'll integrate it next time. I feel like I've been doing a lot of behind the scenes book talk this morning.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great book. So for anyone who doesn't know about the book, do you want to explain it or tell people what it is?
I could.
Please do.
So the book is called...
If you want. You don't have to. That's fine.
Yeah.
The book is called iOS Access for All, Your Comprehensive Guide to Accessibility for iPhone and iPad. And it attempts to be that. It attempts to cover all of the accessibility features in all of the various areas. And it also puts the use of the iOS and iPadOS platforms in an accessibility context. So in other words, I have an iPad chapter that's just about all the stuff you can do with iPadOS, and but then here are the accessibility things you need to know in order to use that effectively. So, and then there's a lot of discussion of the apps that Apple provides, as well as third-party apps that are accessible. So Apple Intelligence will just be another chapter that basically says, hey, there is this new thing, and it is everywhere. It is in your notes. It is in your images. It is in your text messages. It's all over. Be afraid or don't, depending on what you want. And, accessibility context there when we have one.
Brilliant. And usual address for that?
iosaccessbook.com.
Thank you so much for coming on, Shelley. It's always good to talk to you. Come back soon.
It was my pleasure. I'll be glad to.
Thanks, Shelley.
Now, we've been asking you on Mastodon your favorite iOS 18 accessibility features, those of you who have been brave enough to try the beta software. And Shaun, there's one feature above all that stands out from a lot of our listeners who've been getting in touch to say, what their favourite feature is, and that is Braille Screen Input. And we're very pleased to say that Sean Randall has recorded this demo for us.
The first and most significant change of Braille Screen Input on iOS 18 is the way you turn it on. This is the one that will impact anybody who uses it now, because as soon as you upgrade, you're going to lose Braille Screen Input from your rotor. This means that to activate BSI now, you simply turn your phone into the brailing position, which can of course be tabletop or screen away. You can still use either of those. But rather than activating your rotor, you simply braille, you can use any of the fingers. I choose to braille a letter C, twice. So I get my 2 index fingers and I tap the screen roughly in the position I would braille them, sort of either edge of the screen. Apple calls this a 2-finger double tap on the edges. So tap that twice. That is the Braille Screen Input activated noise. And with that on, I can braille as normal. If you had your speech set to tell you about that, it would still do so. I've turned mine off because the sounds are quicker. But that's one of the most important things, I would say, because that determines how you get BSI on. Turn it off, you can scrub, or you can do a 2-finger pinch. So you take your 2 C fingers, if you like, and slide them away from each other, and you're back in your regular flicking mode. So a double tap of the C to go in, and a sliding away, a pinch outward toward the edges of your phone with both those fingers to come out. Quite straightforward, really. The next cool thing, let's go back in. I'm going to write, this is a test. Now, I've written this as a test. What I can now do, which is really cool, is if I hold down my right index finger and I start flicking my left index finger to the left,
space, full stop, T, space.
I move through what I've written letter by letter. Keeping that right finger held down, if I flick down
Words.
with my left hand, that changes what I move by.
A, is, A, test.
And so I have a cursor. I'm going to stop after A and add very fun. There we go. I've now put the words very fun before test. This is a very fun test. So I've moved the cursor whilst editing in BSI. That's the second really interesting thing to show you. You can move using a cursor. And if you add a finger, instead of moving the cursor, you will select text as well.
Fun. Selected. Avery. Selected.
Oops, I made a mistake there. I didn't put a space after the A, so I'm going to delete that.
Selection deleted. Avery fun.
Put A. There we
Very.
go. So I forgot to take into account the space when I was moving my cursor. So yeah, you can move a cursor around and you can select text as well. Finally, Braille Screen Input by default works as it used to in typing mode, but there is now a command mode. That ding sounds like a Perkins bell, doesn't it? It means you are now commanding your phone. And this effectively means that if you are familiar with the Braille display controlling your iPhone, what's happening now is when you go into command mode, the spacebar is effectively held down for you. So all the things you would normally do using a spacebar and a Braille cord, such as pressing B for back, or H for home, or S for the status bar, with the spacebar, you can just Braille using BSI.
Screen recording in progress. 1330. Button.
So
I've
pressed that. I've jumped straight to my status bar because I brailled an S. If I braille an H, I'll go home. That's my drafts note-taking app. If I want to go to the very bottom of my screen, I will braille 456 and that'll take me to my CNAI.
Dock. CNAI.
Bottom right thing in my dock. All the things you would ordinarily press with a Braille display connected and your spacebar, you can do in command mode with a Braille display as well. So that is the power of the command mode for Braille Screen Input. So to cap, the most important thing is turning it on and off. You Braille 2 Cs and you slide your fingers apart to come out of the mode rather than using the rotor. You've got a new command mode. There are more details of how to use that in the help page of the Braille Screen Input settings when you get the upgrade. And there is a cursor which you can use both to edit and move around text on your iPhone as you're writing it without having to leave the Braille Screen Input mode.
Thank you so much to Sean Randall for recording that for us, giving us a bit of an insight into how the new Braille Screen Input works on iOS 18. So very, very exciting. Now, he did record that during the beta phase, so things may have changed a little bit. That's common with the way it works, but on the whole, that seems to still stand up. as the way that most people are utilizing it. It certainly seems to be, even at that early stage when Sean recorded that, it was quite fully baked in at that point, which I think a lot of people are quite surprised about. Devon and Alison, also Roberto and Robin, Chris and Leon on Mastodon say that Braille Screen Input is their favourite feature. Alison also says summaries of emails and text messages is another feature that she's looking forward to in iOS 18. I mean, that makes sense. That's a mainstream feature, though. Although that's okay. You can mention them.
I totally agree, though. I think that's going to be fantastic.
Greg mentions under motion settings, you can turn off blinking cursor. And he says that he loves that on his Braille display. He says no more blinking cursor on dots 7 and 8. You know, that's if you've got an Orbit device.
Sounds like you're indicating.
Exactly. It says you're turning left or right. Yeah, exactly. Now, Samuel, he mentions, and of course this is something I know you're excited about, he mentions that you can change now the camera and the flashlight icons on the front home screen of the device. Yes. Which, of course, is fantastic news now because no longer do you end up accidentally turning on the torch or the flashlight, as you might call it.
I quite like it because I always can tell when Sarah's walking into the room because she's got her little headlight on. It's constantly on. Yeah, it's really handy to be able to get rid of that. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, really, really cool stuff in there. So, yeah, lots of great stuff. Tell us what you're thinking as well about iOS 18 if you've decided to download. Maybe you've got the beta. You've been playing with it over the past couple of months. Tell us your thoughts. You can, of course, get in touch in all the usual ways. Feedback at doubletaponair.com. 1-877-803-4567 is the number to call. You can leave us a voicemail there. You can find us on Mastodon as well. And we're on X. Just search for Blind Guy Tech on there. And the Blurred Nerd, but not that it ever bothers with it, over there on X, do you?
Sorry. No, you don't. No, never. No.
But hey, we're back tomorrow with more of your emails and feedback as we dive into the more broad conversation of tech. That continues here on Double Tap tomorrow. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Bye-bye.